So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Meredith. I am the Vice President of Practice Success here at Dental EMR. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Laura Nelson from Front Office at Rocks. Laura is a public speaker. She's a coach. She's bringing more than 22 years of practice experience. And her company has helped thousands of practices overcome barriers and achieve unprecedented success. So today we are very fortunate to have her here to share with our endo community her strategies and secrets for building a Rockstar team. And that can be from hiring, training, creating a positive and engaging team culture. So that way our team members and our patients and our practice can ultimately thrive. Now, per usual, today's session is going to be a Q&A style. It's one of my favorites. So we have some questions that we've collected from our endodontic community here with maybe a few bonuses thrown in depending on how much time we have. And we're also going to have the chat open to our attendees as well. So I'll be keeping an eye on that as we're going through. If there's any questions that come up, please pop them into the chat box to your right. Laura, first, thank you so much for saying yes to the next hour with us. I'm just so thrilled and excited to have you here. I'm definitely fangirling today for sure. And I know my intro didn't do you nearly enough justice. So is there anything that you'd like to add about Front Office Rocks before we get started with our first question?
No, I mean, I think you did a good job. I am so excited to be here, actually. I wish I could see all the faces of the people who are here, but I'm excited that we could do this virtually. And no, let's get started. I'm ready to jump in and kind of start talking about some of the important stuff.
Amazing. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about building a Rockstar team, but there's a couple of components to that. So kind of some of the higher level topics we're going to be talking about today include strategic hiring framework. We're going to be talking about front office communication, which is a huge thing. I'm really excited about that. Creating a fantastic patient experience, and then ultimately leadership tips for
Right.
maybe even our non-natural team building leaders, that kind of thing. So lots of amazing topics. So let's start with the hiring framework. Laura, you talk a lot about hiring with intention instead of hiring kind of warm bodies. I love that term in your practice. Can you give an example of the best way to hire with intention?
Yeah, so just to kind of back up a little bit so that everybody sort of knows my experience of the journey I was on. I actually was married to a dentist, so that's how I got into dentistry. But my background's human resources and organizational development. So I was in the HR business world. And I was a technical recruiter during the time of the dot-com market, which Meredith, you're probably too young for this, but there was a time before the internet where when the internet was being built, like we were hiring, anybody and anybody that had technology experience. And so to hire, we had to hire super, super fast during that time. So I learned a lot about hiring and the business side. And then I got sucked into dentistry because I was married to a dentist. So I was married to him all through dental school, opened two practices with him, friends with lots of dentists over the years, everyone asking me different questions of like, consult their practice, come in and coach, all of the things. And so I have a lot of experience that now works really well because right now hiring is really hard, no matter where you are in the country. I hear it all the time. And so I can bring that knowledge. And actually, I wrote a book about hiring without hesitation that it's online that you can buy on Amazon, really dives deep into hiring. So the reason I can talk about hiring is because I've had the experience of this. And so many times, the one thing that I think is as a small business owners or as office managers or anyone on the team, we've most of the time have never been trained in hiring, right? We know the process, right? We've listened to our HR professionals, but we actually don't know how to hire well. And it's really just a skill that you can learn, but you have never been taught. I mean, they didn't teach hiring in dental school. I went to college for it, but a lot of people didn't. And so hiring many times is sort of done as like just kind of like a side thing. I mean, on top of everything we have to do every day, see all of our patients, run all the things, pay the bills, do the stuff. Oh, by the way, I got to interview and go through resumes. And when you go into that with that sort of not focused energy, on top of that, there's many people who have a negative intent or idea around hiring. We've hired the wrong people in the past. We've been burned at hiring. We've had a lot of people ghost us and not show up for interviews. So we have this negative idea around hiring. If you go into something with a negative idea, negative things are going to happen, right? Words define your world. And so when I talk about intentional hiring, it's literally, first of all, checking your attitude. Well, how do you feel about hiring? Like, if I personally think I love to hire new people, there's a million great people out there, but I have a good attitude about hiring. The second thing is just because they breathe doesn't mean you should hire them. And so many times we wait, or we have to hire somebody because we have to put somebody in that position, or we're struggling or whatever, that we just hire somebody because they kind of fit. Well, ultimately, you look back 5 years later and you're pulling your hair out because this employee was terrible, and you're like, but you just kind of stuck them in that position. I would rather have the team step up more. I'd rather outsource. I'd rather find automation to do the things than hire the wrong person. That being said, we don't know if somebody's a good hire until they actually work for us. So you could go through the process. You can interview well. You could do personality tests. You could do background checks, all of that. But it's kind of like dating. I mean, if I'd have married every guy that I liked in my first couple of dates, like I'd been married like 12 times, you don't actually know until you get them in there. But the problem is that we're also afraid of firing. And that's a harsh word, but what I mean is we're afraid to let people go. Like, we feel like once we hired them, we're like, okay, this is it. We're gonna have a 30-year career together. When really, we don't know if this is going to work out. And we can't be afraid of letting somebody go if they're not a fit for our practice, because you're going to be so much more focused on hiring the right person because this is forever, when really there's no guarantees this is forever. And so intentional hiring is just really understanding your attitude around it, doing it the right way, which there's a whole book on that. And then understanding that not everybody's going to work out even if you hire well, and you can't be afraid to have that change in your office.
I feel like you kind of have to envision what that role is going to be. Like, if you don't have a true intention of what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be responsible for, what they're going to be taking off of your plate, you are then hiring as a warm body, because then it's like you're not hiring to solve problems or to help fill in a gap. You're just hiring because you've been told you need someone in that role, or you're supposed to have these roles separate, or this person's supposed to do that and this one's supposed to be that. Like, it's kind of really more so looking at what you need specifically and getting clear on that, because then you can't really provide direction to
Right.
that person, even if they're there at that
Yeah,
point.
for sure. And even on top of that, I also think we make hiring really hard because we make the requirements of what we need to hire for this person too much. Meaning, for example, they need to know this software. They've got to been a dental assistant for 4 years. They need to know. I've hired dental assistants that had 4 days of experience that were better than people who had 40 years, right? And so a
Yeah.
lot of times we make it so hard to hire that we can't find good people. We really need to look at, like, what is required, and then what is would be nice, because it would be nice if you knew the software, but we can also train you. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to learn the software. I had to learn dentistry when we all learned, right? So really kind of looking at what your true expectations are.
And it's hard to change personalities. Like, training can always
Yep.
be provided, but like, if you were to hire, for example, if you were to hire someone that has a ton of billing and insurance experience, but they have really poor patient communication
Yep.
or things like that, it's hard to fix that or ask someone to not be, within their personality spectrum. So, even if you found someone that was stellar and just providing them the opportunities, like what you provide at Front Office Rocks, it's like, give them the opportunity to learn it. If they are, if they have the intention to do that, then they could definitely
Right.
learn skills that's even more motivating for them as well, right? To
Right.
to have
And
under their
then
belt.
cycling into our future topic, which kind of leads to it. So I just want to add this in here, is that also you've got to look at your culture of the practice and getting the right fit of the culture. So if we have a culture that's this, and I hire someone that doesn't fit, they're not going to do well, right? Also, hiring is hard right now. I mean, I can go down the street and get paid better at like a fast food restaurant than I can in a lot of offices, right? But if I'm going to hire into my culture, I can hire an average person, and if I have a great culture, my culture is going to elevate that person. So I don't need to go find the superstar. I can find a good person who's trainable, and my culture is going to elevate them. But on the flip side, I could hire a rock star, but if I have a bad culture, I'm going to squash that person, right? I like to joke when I'm speaking about this, like when you go to the DMV to get your driver's license, all the people who worked at the DMV, their very first day, they were excited about working there. Like they were like, this is going to be amazing. And we're going to take great driver's license pictures. And then, but the culture squashed them, right? The people were like, no, that's not what we do here. Don't smile, make them pull a number, you know? So sometimes I think dentists are like, I can't find a good person. Well, then I'm going to suggest, is it necessarily the people, or what do you have going on in your culture? Like, what are you, because that could be causing some of the problems when it comes to hiring and keeping good employees.
I love it. So funny enough, you actually answered the three questions that I had for this section all in one because you're so efficient. So let me ask you kind of a bonus question. With kind of considering that this new hire would be kind of a puzzle piece to the whole big
Yep.
picture, do you recommend involving certain team members with choosing new hires? Is that something that you do recommend?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that I suggest is if you're going to hire a new team member, I actually suggest you go to the team they're going to be working with, and talk to them about what are we looking for, right? For multiple reasons. First of all, if you start interviewing or people get word that you're interviewing, that somebody thinks they're getting fired. So let's not do that, right? Like let's go, hey, we're adding to the team. But the
Yes.
second thing is the team's going to have more buy-in if they can. Like, I would love to sit down with an employee and say, okay, what do you love to do? What would you love to get rid of? Like, what things are on your job duties that you would love to give to someone else? Because they're going to be more bought in to helping find the right person and making this person successful if they know this is a task they don't love doing. So like you said, insurance, right? Let's say you have someone who's great at insurance, but they're not so great at customer service. Well, they'll probably want to say, you know what? I want someone to sit at the front desk because I just want to sit in back and do the numbers. And if they're great at insurance, awesome. Let's go find a perky, outgoing person to sit at the front desk. And then lastly, this team now is going to work hard to, if they're part of the process, help bring this employee in and make them successful versus we tend to be clicky and we kind of push the new person out. But if I know that this new person is being hired with the right personality to do the right things, the team is going to be more welcoming to bring that person in and make them successful. So I think the team should be part of the process. And I think that doing it from the beginning, we can start to look at the things that, what would you like to get rid of so that there's more excitement around bringing somebody new in.
Yeah, and change is hard for anyone, regardless who it is. For a new hire, for anyone who's been there a long time, it's like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to do my job and train this person as well on the side. Everything's gonna get harder. And then the owner who ultimately has to make the decision at the end of the day, or the manager that's making that hire. And that does, to your point, circle back to the culture aspect. It's
Yeah.
involving them in that process. So it doesn't feel like as an owner, you're whipping the rug out from underneath them, and now they're left wondering, oh, great, well, what's going to change now? Like, we haven't even
Right.
been consulted about this. Like, what are we going to expect? So it could solve one problem and introduce another just by
Exactly.
not having those conversations on the front end. And I
I
love
actually,
you.
I was just going to tell a quick story about this. I did this with my dental assistants,
Yeah.
and two dental assistants, and we were hiring a third. And so I sat down with them and I was like, let's talk about what kind of personality we need, what we want them to do, like what would you guys like to get rid of? And shockingly, they were both single moms and they were working and taking care of the kids and stuff. They both asked for more of a leadership person, somebody who could come in and lead the dental assistant team, somebody who could help spend more time in like the organization because they wanted to come to work, get the job done, and go home and take care of their kids. I would have thought for sure one of them has said, I want to be the lead, hire somebody that works for me. But they both asked to have somebody come in to be the lead, which I would have never known that if I would have, if I wouldn't have had that conversation. So this is just an example of like, we're not trying to just be like, give them the grunt work, give them the bad stuff. We're literally, they're telling you from their personality style what they need to be more successful.
I love that. I think that's amazing. And it does highlight that even as an owner, you might think you know what the
Right.
problem is that you're trying to solve, but it could be something else. And the team evolves over time, right? Just because it's been the status quo this way for so long doesn't mean that anyone who's been there the longest necessarily wants to jump into a leadership role. They may not feel comfortable or want that level of responsibility. They may be completely comfortable in the role they're in now. They just, want someone else to come in and do that. So
Actually, yeah. And there's a mantra that I always say when I'm talking to people about that also is those that got you here may not get you there. So I had a junior office manager who worked for me, and she worked for me for a super long time, but she got to a point where she couldn't grow. She couldn't learn the new. We did a software switch. And she was so used to being the expert on everything. And then when we changed softwares, she was making mistakes like everybody because we were all learning the new software, but she didn't know how to admit that she made mistakes. And she got to a point where we've sat down multiple times and we ended up separating ways. And she realized like it was her own ability to not be able to say I was wrong or I made a mistake.
yeah.
But it's hard because you're like, she worked for me for like 6 years and she was amazing. But those that get you here may not be the ones that get you there. And that's part of the not being afraid to let somebody go if it's not working out. Of course, you want to do all the things to try to make it work out. But we're not committed for life. We're here to do what's right for the business.
Well, and if you push it long enough, they'll leave on their own. We see this a lot with new practices where perhaps they are hiring in a jam. They're trying to get someone in that space to be able to facilitate new patients coming in. And it's a lot of overwhelm. Maybe there isn't clear direction. Maybe there's a lot of changes all at once and they're just not really clear how to be successful. And I
Right.
don't think really there's any human on the face of this planet that enjoys not being successful at what they're doing. So you kind of have to keep in mind that someone's only going to do that for so long before they're like,
Yeah.
I just don't enjoy coming to do this every day. I don't feel like I'm good at what I do. I don't feel like I'm succeeding. I don't feel like I'm getting praised for what I'm doing. So I'm going to go and do something else somewhere
Right.
else. Like you can try and force it as long as you want to, but ultimately, I mean, they might end up leaving as well. So, you
Yep.
could only force it for so long, typically.
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's perfect. That leads us into our next topic, which is more of the front office communication, talking about being successful with patients on the front and kind of juggling everything, right? Because I feel like the front office is kind of everybody to some degree is getting inundated with things all throughout the day. But I feel like the front seat, for some reason, just feels like the most abrasive one because we've got phones and people and other
Yep.
things happening all at once. So Laura, what is your secret for getting a front office staff that is more confident in that role in, let's say, talking about treatment costs and finances with patients?
So part of the reason I named Front Office Rocks is for that reason, Front Office Rocks, because we're rock stars, right? Like we use a lot of times we're called the front desk. Go to the front desk, right? I'm not a piece of furniture. I actually am the first and last impression of every appointment, right? And so, I started Front Office Rocks 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and the idea was to not only get the dentist to realize how important the front office is, right? But also to get the front office team members to realize how important you are, right? You are the first and last impression. You are these interactions. And so I don't think it's just the front office, like you said. I think it's the whole team. I think it's the communication between the team. I think it's, all the interactions patients have with us. Most offices have a backdoor problem, meaning you're losing more patients out the back door than you're getting in the front door. And if we could really focus on our internal systems within our four walls, the way we communicate, the way we work with our patients, the systems that we do, we can close the backdoor problem because maybe not fully, but close it so that we're not losing more than we're gaining. And really, it comes down to two things for me. It's customer service and systems. And so, first of all, is understanding we need to be running our systems. So, for front office team members, just like back, like you wouldn't assist differently every time. You have a system to how you assist, right? That's the same
Yeah.
in the front. That's the same. And we need to be running our huddles a certain way. We need to do handoffs a certain way. We need to answer the phones a certain way. Like there are systems that we need to be running in the practice to make sure that patients don't walk out the front door without their appointment, right? We need to run systems on where to do case presentations. I prefer not to do it standing at the front desk when they're 5 steps away from the front door, right? There are ways that we need to do things that we have full control over in the office. And then there's the customer service side of things. Patients are expecting more now than ever before. They're paying more than they did before. Insurance has not increased in the last 15, 20 years, but our prices have gone up. So patients are expecting more. So if we realize that the two things that we really need to focus on are systems and customer service, and we understand that we have full control over that. See, a lot of offices blame competition, patients have bad insurance, it's the economy, I'm not growing, right? Those are all potentially true, but those are outside factors. You can't do anything about the economy or a recession or the political whatever we're in, right? But you do have control over what you do within your four walls. And so for the front office team, we have a lot to deal with, like you said, at once. I mean, we're answering phones, patients in front of us, we're holding a baby on our hip because the mom forgot a babysitter, the doctor wants to know where his patient is, the hygienist wants to. So understanding that we've got a lot coming at us and we need to look at all the things we do and really understand what is the priority. Unfortunately, in the dental office, we've really become, I say, dental box thinking, where a lot of dental offices, a lot of front office teams puts the priority on dental things like insurance. We focus on insurance. We focus on what insurance do you have? Does your insurance going to cover this? We're going to call insurance. We're going to, right? Which insurance is part of the game. I'm not saying it's not going anywhere. It's part of the game. But really what we need to remember is we don't work for the insurance companies. We work for our dentist and we work for our patients. And when a patient is standing in front of me, that is my opportunity to communicate with a patient, give good customer service, make sure they've, paid their bill, that they've got their next appointment scheduled. Like the patients are the priority. So when we're looking at how we're going through the day, really starting to say, like, am I really focused on the dental box things, or am I focused on really taking care of my patients and running our systems? Because that's really how your practice is going to grow and do better.
Yeah, and by systems, do you mean sometimes when I hear systems, I think of like software, but you actually mean even like protocols or like certain ways that you handle specific cases or just all patient phone calls across the board. Is
Yeah,
that right?
I
Yeah.
just did a webinar yesterday and they did a survey of the people on the webinar and it was about morning huddle. I said, how many people run their morning huddle? And 35% of the people don't even have a huddle. A huddle is a system. It's part of what you should be doing. And the issue is either the dentist as a leader, which we'll get to, isn't prioritizing the huddle as important, or the manager, or we're having huddles and basically it's just becoming what did you do last night? Oh, what are you eating for breakfast? Like that's not a huddle. Or we're just going through who's on the schedule for the day. Well, I could look at the schedule and see who's on the schedule for the day. That's not a huddle. But there is a system to running a huddle. And there's plenty of consultants out there who could teach you. And I have systems of like, this is what you should be doing in the huddle. But a huddle is a system. It is a thing to
Yeah.
start the day every day to go through and make sure we're all on the same page. Handoffs are a system, where we present treatment, like those type of things. There is a standard protocol. We're a business and there's like a way a thing goes, a patient goes from the front door to the time they leave. And there are systems along the way. There are steps and ways we do things that everyone on the team needs to understand and then do well so that we can take care of our patients.
Yeah, and I remember definitely having this conversation when I was in my old practice before of like, we don't want to meet for the sake of meeting. Like
Right.
everyone brings a certain amount of energy to that huddle. So they may even be responsible for contributing to the huddle to some degree, just so it doesn't also feel like one person is responsible for telling everything and then
Yeah.
everyone else is just sipping their coffee and they're just there because they have to be there. It could really be a mindset shift in the morning where everyone gets on the same page, ready to go, geared up. And then now we start seeing patients and our patients get our best self instead of it being, oh, I was 20 minutes late and I'm just going to start diving in. Hi, patient, let me get you checked in, whatever.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
nice to get on that same page first thing in the morning.
A lot of it too is I talk about communication in the dental office. I talk about the right amount of communication. And we have we know when we walk into a dental office, like we have the best intention of like, we're going to get all this stuff done. And before you know it, it's like 3 in the afternoon and we haven't gotten anything done and we haven't gone to the bathroom, we haven't had lunch, and the dental office runs us, right? It's because a lot of the activity in a dental office is very right now, let's handle it now, let's do it live, let's do it in the hallways, let's talk about it, let's do it and so we have all these fires we're always putting out. We're always like, right? But really, if you run your huddle well, if you have your team meeting, if you do handoffs well, if you follow systems that are in your practice, you can have less of that putting fires out all the time, because the morning huddle is a good example. That's the day we look for potential fires. I do believe everybody should come prepared. Some people come with a balance, some come with what's the next appointment, some people come, the assistant looks at the lab cases, all the things. And we are, as a team, proactively prepping for the day, because there are some things we can't predict, like the tornadoes or traffic jams. But there's a lot of stuff that we can proactively get ahead of as a team if we actually ran a huddle that ran well.
I love that. Yeah. I used to bring Google reviews that would name staff members to the
Uh-huh.
huddle and like have like little spotlights. And it's amazing to see how energized the staff gets when they realize, oh my gosh, I'm being called out. Like this is even a moment for appreciation before we get started. So everyone's off on the right foot.
Another
Yeah.
great thing about that is the things that you're doing. Not everybody reads the huddles or the reviews in the team. And so the things that patients are spotlighting about you, if the team hears it, they know do more of that,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't all read it and they can hear like, oh, this is something that people really like. That's part of I mean, customer service is defined by your patients. What do they like about your practice? So that brings it in and reminds everybody, these are the things patients love about us.
Yeah, and it leaves the room for like we did a really good job there. Let's keep doing that thing instead of we constantly need to make this process better. We constantly need
Right.
to, do more of this or do more of that. I feel like there is a lot of influence over push, 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 push
Mhm.
without enough kind of recalling back to, wow, that was really great. We need to take a
Right.
moment to appreciate that because we did a really good job there. And it
For
can go
sure.
a long way for
For
sure.
sure. And even if you get a bad review, there's always a learning point in there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't want to look at bad reviews. We all think about it. It's our subconscious. We could have 5,000 good reviews, but it's about one bad review. But there's a learning lesson in every bad review. And the learning lesson many times might be that you broke your policies to squeeze this patient in, and they ended up burning you and putting a bad review out. So now don't break your policies, right? Because this is your lesson learned. So there's always something that you can learn from the reviews.
Yeah, I love that. I do tend to feel like leadership that focuses more on like, well, this was a bummer, but that's okay. At least we know how we can like, springboard off of this. We know what to do different last time rather than feeling like, oh my gosh, it's a bad review. We're going to get reprimanded or so we're going to have a serious conversation, those kinds of things. Because there's always room for improvement. That's really what a bad review is. It's basically telling you exactly what you can focus on to improve. So, I mean, there's
I
no,
talk about that with the doctors walking into the huddle in the morning. Your attitude, how you walk into the huddle, defines the day. And so let's just say you walk in and the schedule fell apart for today. Well, you can walk into the huddle and just be like, who did this and why did that and who and point fingers, and everyone's going to just get like bad mood and we're all going to be pointing fingers and blaming whatever. Or you can walk in and be like, okay, well, that sucks. We need to figure out what broke. But in the meantime, Meredith, I need you to do this. And this hygienist, I need you to do that. And everybody, okay, great, team break, right? And we feel more like a team. Now, if systems broke and things weren't done well, we want to go back and fix those. But by coming in and like, rah, it's just setting the day wrong, right? And so that's really where the leader makes a big difference.
I love it. Well, I've taken us a little far off with the reviews in the huddle, so I'm going to bring
Uh-huh.
us back to the front office role. So basically, we had a couple of questions still around that front office role, and one of them is, what's one of the practical tips you offer teams just to start using, like maybe tomorrow, to make their first impression with the patient on that very first call? Just go from
Yeah.
like 0 to 100.
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, my foundation is smile. Just
Yeah.
smile. We forget, right? We just spent years behind masks. I'm in California, so there was years behind masks. We get crazy busy. We don't even realize, we sometimes end up with that RBF face, whatever, right? So if it means sticking something on your phone, on your computer, or somewhere that just says smile, to remind yourself to smile. That is the easiest way to give the patient the experience of a good customer experience, because you might be totally stressed about the schedule and insurance and all this stuff, but if you at least smile at a patient, that's the minimum. The second thing is, again, I believe that we go to insurance so fast when we answer phones, when we have conversations with patients. Most dental offices, if I used to do mystery calls into offices, and they might say, "What's your name?" If I called in, "What's your name? How did you hear about us?" And usually the third question out of their mouth is, "Do you have insurance, or what dental insurance do you have?" Right? Well, the reason I say, I'm not saying don't ask about insurance. I'm just saying putting it at the end of the call, because what we're doing is we're starting our relationship with our patients saying insurance is important. And
Yeah.
then, but we forget this, right? We were like, "Oh, but we don't want to waste our time out if they don't have insurance and whatever." I want to know, who are you? Why are you calling us? How can I take care of you? This is a human on the other end of the phone, not an insurance book. And we forget that we start the relationship with insurance. And then when we sit down to present treatment to them and they wave their insurance book at us and say, "Well, I'm only doing what the insurance covers," we get frustrated that all of our patients are all about insurance. Well, we started that relationship with insurance, right? So really putting insurance where it belongs. It is part of the process. Patients have it, we have to work with it, like all of the things. But ultimately, we work for our patients, right? And so, who are you? Nice to meet you. Welcome to our practice. Why are you calling today? Like, build some rapport with this patient. When they come in, don't talk about them as a number, and just have a seat and we'll be right with you. We're doing tooth number two surface, MODB. Like, actually, this is a human. How are you? How's it been since the last time we've seen you? Spend a couple minutes with them on a human to human level before we put on our dental hats and really jump into the dental terminology.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a really sensitive topic in the endodontic space because most of the patients coming into an endo office are typically in acute pain, right? They're
Right.
having some issues. They're probably already a little agitated. Now they have to have a root canal when they really needed to work this week and not take time off. And it's a
Yep.
cost they didn't anticipate, and their tooth is throbbing. So there are some of those rare cases where a patient will call and they're asymptomatic, but most of the patients are already, there are some concerns. And we do field these questions a lot when it comes to, well, I got to make sure I get everything I need from that patient. And the thing is like the patient has so many variables they're trying to juggle in their head. If we can just recognize the fact that they are probably in pain and they're probably going through a pretty difficult time, asking those questions and getting a better feel of what they need from us specifically, we can even, set aside that insurance conversation for later because there is so much to gather from that patient once they're having that acute need.
And I think, I mean, people, if you were to just I've unfortunately had a few root canals and they're not my favorite. And just to have somebody on the phone who says, "You must be in a lot of pain. Like, how are you doing? Or do you have to take time off of work?" Oh, we totally understand. That's, you weren't planning this, right? We understand. Here's a good example. When somebody says, this happens a lot, right? "That's expensive." So a patient will be like, "Oh my gosh, that's expensive." We tend to get defensive. Like, "Well, you don't understand. We have the best technology of all of the endodontists in there," or "Well, we have the best teams," or, "Well, like we get defensive."
Yeah.
Think about it. Whatever it costs, that's a lot of money, right? Human to human, I'm not expecting to spend $1,000, $3,000 on something. And when I hear that that's expensive, how about saying, "I totally understand. It is a lot of money." Like, human to human, because it is a lot of money. And we're not saying like we're overcharging. They're not saying we're just acknowledging the person and we're helping them feel heard. And when somebody feels heard, you're going to have a higher chance of case acceptance and referrals and great experience, because you just saw them at the human level and not at the tooth dental code level.
It does require you to be present in the moment because we
Yeah,
get so caught up in our dental lingo and what we see every day, and this is a normal, and this is something new for a patient. It's Wednesday afternoon, Monday and Tuesday went great, and suddenly now they have a tooth
yeah,
that's blown up and they need a root canal, and they have, like you said, 1,000 to 3,000 out of pocket that they hadn't budgeted. In
yeah,
a general dentist office, when we see them for their free cleaning, they have time to think about that restorative work that's going to cost them some money and they need to budget it out
right.
for and things like that, you know. So in our particular specialty, I think it's amazing that you brought that up because we do get so caught up in what we're doing all the time that we forget this is brand new for this
Yeah.
patient.
And think
It's
about it.
really
Think about the
overwhelming.
words we use. Like, patients, all they know is they're in pain. And next
Yeah.
thing you know, we're talking about endodontic, we're talking about gutta percha, we're talking about, and like to them, I mean, the word prophylaxis, you brought up cleaning, that just sounds dirty, right? Like, don't worry, we're going to probe you first. Like, all of these words that we use, we get numb to them because we're in the dental box.
Yeah.
To our patient, it's a root canal. To our patient, I'm in pain. To our patient, it's $3,000, right? And just slowing down enough to acknowledge. And I teach it's called the buying cycle. And basically in the buying cycle, we're just acknowledging what they say as they're saying these things because they're going through the process in their head. A good example, I'm just going to tie it to anyone who's just take it out of dental for a minute. If you go shopping and you go, Meredith, you go to a store and you pick up a pair of shoes and you're like, these shoes are amazing. Like I got to have these shoes, right? Like these are, what do you do before you buy the shoes? You look at the bottom and you look at the price. And then that voice in your head starts. This is expensive. I don't know if I should spend that money. Can I hide them from my husband? Like, do I really need them? Should I find them on sale? So when we hear these pushbacks for our patients, like this is a lot and I wasn't expecting this. Do I have to take time off of work? They're actually in a buying process. They're actually considering it. But we get so like, okay, you got to do it. Here's your insurance. When do you want to schedule? And we're not slowing down enough to realize like if we just hear what they say, acknowledge them, and then tell them again why they need it and hear what they say and acknowledge what they say because what they say is real from their perspective. It's not wrong. That when they say this sucks, it's okay to go, I understand. It sucks, right? Because they are human and we're just helping them, basically figuratively putting our arm around them saying, we got you. We understand this isn't what you expected. This isn't what's fun, but we're going to take care of you and they're going to trust your practice more.
100%. And it is that cost valuation to, or value proposition to a cost valuation. You want to do that first. It's all the more
Yeah.
reason why you should actually try to continue the conversation as long as possible before you introduce the insurance
Yeah.
piece, unless the
Yeah.
patient of course, brings it up, because it does give you that opportunity to build that trust, build that confidence, answer any questions the patient may have about the process. You
Yep.
know, you may have patients that are not worried as much about the cost. They're worried about the treatment because they have
Yep.
severe dental anxiety and they're
Yep.
looking for someone who has their back and someone who's going to say, yeah, it's expensive because we're the best versus someone who's going to say, I totally get it. You're in pain. This is inconvenient and
Yep.
we can get you in as soon as possible. You just let me know how I can help you do that. And
Exactly. Exactly. And I
yeah.
would assume, I mean, I've never worked in an endo office, but I would assume you probably have a lot of patients with dental phobia. That's why their tooth has gotten to the place it's gotten to. So really understanding and having those conversations with a patient is important for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, that moves us on to patient experience, which again, all of these are so interwoven. I feel like
Right.
we've kind of ducking and weaving into all of these different topics. But this one has to do with patient physically being in the office. Let's say we get past that initial conversation because we did an amazing job at presenting to that patient what we can offer and we got them into the physical practice. When you think of practices that truly wow their patients, what are they doing differently during that patient journey? Since we've already talked about the phone call, they're here in the practice now. What can we do differently there?
Well, again, we get so busy on the dental stuff that we forget there's a patient sitting in front of us. And so just from the minute they walk in the door, right? From the confirmation calls, all of that is just taking a minute to realize that this is a human on the other end of the phone or on the other, in the confirmation call or when they walk in. If you still have the sign in and sit down check-in process, get rid of it. Like if I feel like I go to doctor's offices now and they're like, sign in and sit down. And you sit down and you're like, how long is this going to be? And who am I waiting for? And like there's no, we know who walked in. We know who's on our schedule. If there's two patients scheduled today, I know you're either Joe or Sarah. Hi, Joe. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you, right? Introducing yourself, using their name. People love to hear their name, right? Look also at the environment in which you make them wait. Like, do you have magazines that are 10 years old? Is your walls, do you have shag rug carpeting or, like the space in which they sit in? I mean, you've got patients who are in pain, they're already amped up. Look at things like, are you playing television? What are they watching? Are they watching news and how bad the economy is? Are they watching, right? So like pay attention to the environment because they're already amped up probably. And then we put them in an environment. We want it to be relaxing. We want it to be as whatever we can do to calm their nerves. Take time to talk to the patient. Like slide your paperwork aside for 90 seconds and ask them how their drive was. How was the weekend? Something about the weather. People like to talk about themselves. Ask them questions about themselves. I see it all the time where there's a patient sitting in the reception area and two girls are over here chit-chatting behind the front desk and the patient's sitting there no one is talking to them. So put the patient first always. And then realize it's everybody on the team. So we may have the best customer service in the front and welcome back patient or welcome patient. So glad to see you. We're going to take care of you. And then the dental assistant comes from the back and is like, Mr. Joe, let's go. And you're like, well, there goes all my customer service it takes every one of us, right? And so really working on getting the patient, greeting them, taking them back, handoffs, all of the things to make the patient feel cared for, heard, and that we're communicating all the information we need to from employee to make sure that patient gets taken care of.
One of my favorite things that I used to do in the practice, and I had to get comfortable with this. I was not comfortable doing it in the beginning, but like when we were running late and patients were waiting, I would intentionally make my way back to clinical staff, get like a temperature of how they were doing, what the approximate time was, and I would come back and I would lean over the desk and say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. They're about 15 minutes late, but we're going to take you back a little bit earlier than that. And then just like
Yep,
provide constant updates. It
for
feels like,
sure.
oh, it's like an extra thing that I have to do to manage the patient. But if you've ever been in the front and you have a patient running that's late, we're running late for their appointment, and they're boring a hole in the center
Yeah,
of your forehead, and you're like, oh my God, come get this patient. Please come get this patient.
yeah,
Just address it.
yeah,
Address the elephant in the room and
yeah,
just admit, hey, we're running late, but I wanted to let you know they're going to be taking you back here soon.
yeah,
It's amazing how it releases tension for you, for the patients. I mean, it's like you said, for medical appointments, how many times have we gone in and they came in and the nurse triaged us and it was like 45 minutes before
yeah,
anyone came in, a doctor came in to talk to us. Every time we heard someone walking past the door, we thought, oh, it's my turn. And
yeah,
then it wasn't
yep,
your turn. So silence and not having any sort of feedback on what to expect throughout the patient journey is really deafening for
yep,
anyone in that situation. And I feel like even having just a little check-in that says we're not ready yet, but we're almost there, it
yep.
is nice from the patient's perspective just to be, kind of recognize that, oh, we didn't forget you were there, even
I
though
actually think along the way too, one of the things patients are nervous in the dental office, right? So just updating them throughout the process. What are we doing? What's next? How much longer? What you just said, I love that. I would even add to that, it depending on the scenario, the type of patient, how long and all that is stop what you're doing and have a conversation with the patient. Like take 5 minutes if you're running behind and talk to them. And I've heard a lot of offices that do this have a backup like $5 Starbucks gift card and hand them or a $10 card that says, we're really sorry. We had to squeeze, especially in endo, right? We had to squeeze a patient in, which we would do that for you or your family members, but we acknowledge that you have to wait. And here's, have coffee on us tomorrow and give them a Starbucks gift card. Like it's so little to do these things, but people are going to go out and talk about you in your practice if you're amazing or you're awful. And so hopefully you're not awful, right? But what can you do to just be a little bit of amazing? Because when people talk about you, it's usually when they got amazing service or when you messed up, but you fixed it, right?
Yeah,
When you, so like, yes, they ran behind, but they gave me a Starbucks gift card. And this morning I'm having coffee and I'm leaving a great review about them, right? Like, what can you do to
yeah,
set yourself apart for that? And as an endo, that's going to go back to the general dentist and they're going to talk about how they got taken care of. And that's going to get more referrals to your practice.
100%. If you're late, you're late. Like nothing is going to change that. It's better to just address it. And,
And for
you
the
know,
clinical team, say how much you're really behind. Don't say 5 minutes if it's 30 minutes. Like, tell us the worst case scenario, because, like you said, if we say 5 minutes, now the patient's staring at us because it's 15 and we have no idea how far behind you're running. So be realistic with that.
you mean like oh, well, you told me that you told me
Yeah.
5 minutes, 30 minutes ago type
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
exactly.
We did used to have a policy, and this obviously I'm gonna rely on you for this and how you kind of feel about it in terms of its success. But I do know in our old office we had a policy where if we were late past a certain degree, we actually gave the patient the right to reschedule because we don't know what they have set up for after this appointment. We've told
Right.
them that it would approximately take about an hour and a half, but now that we're half an hour in, we're now at 2 hours. And sometimes just even giving that patient the option of we recognize that we're actually going to run later than we thought we were.
Mhm.
Here's what I can do for you. If you're good to wait, we're definitely going to see you today and get that done. But if you need to reschedule, if you have other things, I will make that available to you. And I
Right.
think to practices that feels really scary because it's like, oh no, now we're like turning away patients and we're making it to where they can reschedule or cancel on our schedule. I never had any patients say, yeah, put me on a different day.
Yeah.
I
Right.
never did. We offered it all the time, but it's more so the fact, like you said, we're not perpetually saying it's 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. We're actually being
Right.
real about what our turnaround time is and when we think we can get them back in the chair. And if
Exactly.
it's beyond that time period, we're saying this is our bad.
Mhm.
Here's your option. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? Because if you get to that 30-minute period and they're like, I wish someone would have just told me, I would have just rescheduled my appointment. Now
Right.
you're in like a totally different
Exactly.
conversation with that patient.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And so part of what we're talking about here is a lot of the offices run around and like, what do we do? We're running late. I don't know. What do we do? Whatever. What I suggest is that you write a scheduling policy so it's clear. If you are going to run 30 minutes behind, then are you going to offer them to reschedule or not? And is that your policy? Because now we no longer have to run around and say, what do we do? I don't know. Ask the doctor. Should we reschedule the patient? We just know this is the policy because what happens a lot of times is we're very reactive with our schedule. We're like,
Yeah.
what do we do? We're running behind. Everybody doesn't know what to do. And we run behind. Patients run behind. Things happen.
Yeah.
Well, then as a team, let's agree. And this is where team meetings come in play. Let's have a team meeting. Let's make a list of everything that happens to our schedule that might cause issues. And then how do we handle it? Then we all agree on it because then there's not well, what happened with the patient today? I don't know. Meredith did it, right? Like then you got
Yep.
drama, then you got pointing fingers. So having a proactive, the thing that kills me is so many times within offices are like surprised. Well, we don't know what to do. And it's like patients run late all the time. So what are
Yeah.
we going to do about it? Like, let's make a policy, which is a system, right? This is part of the what do we do with schedule? And then that way the whole team's on the same page.
And again, recapping to confidence in your team, if they know what to revert to when you, as the doctor, have your hands in a patient's mouth and you don't want to be talking to them
Right.
about another patient, you need to be able to confidently make a decision on behalf of the practice as a whole without fearing that you are going to be reprimanded about it or you're making the wrong decision. So this is twofold for practice owners, office managers, and for team members. Like we have to agree and stick to that policy so that way when it does happen, we don't feel like we can't make decisions without each other. And, we are in agreement if that's what the patient's deciding to do. They ended up rescheduling. There were many times where, if I could have gone to my doctor and said, hey, don't worry, he rescheduled for later, he would have been like, oh, thank God. I
Right.
can I can
Yeah.
fix what I'm doing here instead of rushing so much. So
And
yeah,
again, that's less activity in the day. If we have policies that we know what to follow, we have less people interrupting each other and trying to, like, we can focus on what we're doing because we know we're just going to follow what the policy is.
That's amazing. Well, the last question I had for this section, we've already answered. It was basically, if a practice feels stuck and they want to improve those policies, where's the easiest place to start? And we've already answered that. Get really clear on what your trickiest situations are, get a
Mhm.
policy for it and stick to it. Make sure that you are educating your patients throughout the process. So that way, you have a little bit more flexibility if things go wrong because they almost
And
go wrong.
document it. So what I document it, write it down, and I say put it in like the break room or your lockers or whatever, where everybody can refer to it. Because a lot of times we talk about things, but we don't document it and then we don't refer back to it. But if I don't know and I'm a new employee, I'm like, what do? I can go to the scheduling policy and say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. That way, new employees come in and they know there's a system and they don't make mistakes because they're following what was documented.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well, we have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to go into our last section, which is leadership tips for non-natural team builders. Now, we all know, as you said, Laura, they do not put dentists through any sort of business classes or HR classes or things like that. I mean, if they do, it's very brief, right? It's like an afternoon lecture, so they really don't emphasize a whole lot in this area. And there are just some personalities for practice owners that they really just don't want to take that leadership role or it doesn't come naturally to them.
Right.
So, what's the first step to becoming a stronger leader for your team, in your opinion?
Well, I would say so for years and years and years, I've talked about how dentists need to be better leaders. And I see like kind of like the deer in the headlights face when I'm talking about it because dentists didn't, some did, but many dentists didn't go to school. Like if I would have said to a dentist before they went to school, by the way, you're going to work in a business that most of your customers don't like what you do. You're going to manage a bunch of women. We're all going to argue about the temperature and we're all going to bring you lots of problems. The dentist might have changed what they were going to school for, right? They went to school for the clinical, they went to school for the patient care, for the medical, right? They went to school for different reasons. So dentists may not be true leaders. There's two things that I say about this. One is you still need to work on leadership skills because the day you put your name on the wall, the day you signed the lease, the day you hired your first employee, you became the leader by default. And so there are things that you can learn how to do to get better at. And I would suggest going outside of dental. This is a great training, but go outside of dental too and go read TED Talks, take a course, read a book, find areas where you can improve on leadership skills, the things communication or motivation or whatever is wherever you're not strong. The second thing I would say, though, is you can hire great leaders, right? There are amazing office managers, dental assistants, hygienists who can help lead a lot of the stuff that maybe you're not strong in. But that being said, I believe what you have to do is you have to attract the right people into your environment, the right team, the right patients. You've got to develop the right treatment plans. You've got to develop the right training, which is front office rocks. You can train your team on all the different things that are needed. But then ultimately, somebody has to drive the bus, right?
Yeah.
Jim Collins, Good to Great. We have people on our bus and seats in the bus, and they have to be in the right seats, but somebody's got to be in the driver's seat of the bus. And the biggest issue that I see with offices that are not doing well is that the dentist is not sitting in the driver's seat of the bus. So if you're not a strong leader, or if you are not the born leader, you can put leaders around you. There's a lot of amazing Rockstar employees, but still, only the dentist should be sitting in the driver's seat of the bus because there are going to be times when half the team wants to go right and half the team wants to go left. And if somebody doesn't make the decision, now we've got the issue in the practice. And so the dentist needs to be the one in the driver's seat to say, okay, I've heard all of the rights and the lefts, and we're going to turn left. And now everybody on the team needs to be on the page to turn left.
Yeah.
And so that seat, and I actually was speaking recently, I told this in a longer form, speaking, and I had a dentist come up to me afterwards and she said, you figured out my practice and I know the problem. I said, what? And she said, I'm not in the driver's seat of my bus. One of my employees is driving the bus. And if that employee is driving the bus, then you don't have control over which way the bus goes. And so really it's a matter of just recognizing this is your practice and your team works for you. You build a business on positions and people fill those positions. Hopefully we have the right people because we hire well and we love our team, but I pay them for a job to do. And you are to do this job. And here I give you a great place, I give you training, I do all the things. But when I, as the dentist, decide we're going to go left, you're going to come left with us and I'll help you, whatever that looks like. But I'm driving the bus. And I think that's the biggest thing that dentists can embrace of it's your practice at the end of the day.
And I think a lot of dentists struggle with making decisions without having all of the information, especially if there's a lot of elements in the practice like insurance or billing that they don't fully understand, right? They might feel more confident in the clinical aspect of things or even, patient care just in general. But there's so many unknowns and I can imagine it can feel very overwhelming as a practice owner to feel like I need to make all these decisions, but I don't actually know how things are working. And I'm not really sure who to trust because I don't actually know how to discern who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't know and who's just, kind of there to persuade me in certain directions. So
Right.
I love your thought of bringing in someone outside, like whether you find like a really good office manager that can give you some insights on which direction to go or what things to look out for, or just simply look for a consultant or a
Right.
mentor or someone who can bring in some outside perspectives so you know what options you have in terms of decisions and you know that there's someone there who is going to have your back to help you with those decisions long term.
When I first started Front Office Rocks, the reason that I started everything that I have done is kind of, I didn't know at the time, but there's a trifecta thing to it or a triangle. I had a lot of friends who are dentists who were like, "Can you consult? Can you come in? Can you be my advisor?" And I didn't want to. I was running my own practice. I had my own dentist to get in line, right? So what I did was the biggest thing was first was Front Office Rocks. You've got to train your team members well. You cannot assume that they're good at case acceptance, presenting treatment, talking to patients about money, all of the things you do, answering phones. So you got to train them well. But then you've got to hire well. And so that's where I wrote the book on hiring because you can train them, but if they're not somebody who can learn or they don't have the right personality, like you said, I can train them all day long and they're not going to be great. So you have to learn how to hire well. So I wrote the book on hiring. And then the third part is Step Away from the Drill, which is my other book. And that is written to dentists on what you're talking about. Dentists understand the clinical side of things. They understand what the assistant should be doing, the hygienist should be doing, but there's a lot of dentists who don't understand what should be happening in the front desk. And I hear they talk about, like, I walk past the front desk and I hear how they're answering the phones, and I know that's not how it should be answered, but I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what they should be doing. I just know what they shouldn't be doing. So it's hard for somebody to lead something if they don't understand the concepts of it. Just like I'm not a dentist, but I understand the concepts of a root canal. I can talk to a patient about a root canal and all the steps. You should be able to understand the concepts of the phone, the schedule, insurance, AR, all the things that happens in the front office. And so that
Wow.
was my third part of this is if you hire well, you know how to lead them and you train them well, then you can have a rock star team, right? That rocks. And really in the front office, that's the area that the dentists are not the strongest. And so leaning into becoming a better leader for your front office team and your whole team in general is going to turn the practice into a rock star team.
Amazing. We have time for maybe one more question and then we
Cool.
will completely close it out on the hour. I don't see any. Oh, I do have a Q&A. Just kidding. Hold on just a second. So we do have a question here. What is the best way to make a patient feel cared for when you are the only one at the front desk so you don't off put them? I feel like we did cover this a little bit. I may have catched this kind of a little bit late in the game. Do you want to touch on that a little bit
I'll
more, Mary?
add to it just so anybody listening to this, because we were talking about this, Meredith, before we got on earlier, is that it is a lot when you're at the front and you're answering phones and the patient's standing in front of you and all of that. Up to this point, I would teach how to handle a patient and don't put a patient on hold and all that, which I have all that training on Front Office Rocks, but I'm going to add to it what's coming into our industry, which is AI. And I know some people are like, AI, it's not robots. They're not here to replace us. Where AI is to help us do tasks. And so near soon, there's going to be AI where basically we can clone ourselves on some of the tasks that we do. So we have more time for the patients in front of us. So things like calling insurances. AI is going to be able to do that for us. If you can't get to the phone because there's a patient in front of you, we'll be able to have AI phone agent who can answer the phone, trained in a way that you want that phone answered. Recare calls, reactivation calls. There's a lot of things that we do every day that in the front office, that's why we're trying to spread ourselves so thin, that we're really going to start really having some help and support with AI. So brush up on AI is my new kind of group. So join it on Facebook. I have a newsletter, but that's going to change a lot over the next 6 months to 6 years when it comes to how do we do these things in the front office.
Yeah, and I'm just going to repeat this because I love the way that you frame it. You said it replaces tasks, not people. And for me, that was a huge aha moment when you first told me that, because I was like, oh my God, she's so right. Because I am one of those people that's a little bit more skeptical of AI and its effectiveness, particularly in patient care, just because there is that level of sensitivity and nuance in this industry that maybe some other industries don't have,
Right.
right? So patients are in pain, that this is something personal to their mouth, their body, those kinds of things. So I love that perspective that it really is meant to help us be better for those patients by taking things off of our plate.
For sure.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I don't see any other questions as of right now, so I think we are good to go there. Laura, again, thank you so much for your time. What is the best way for attendees to find your training courses and resources? Is it just your website?
Yeah, so Front Office Rocks is available 24/7 online training. So you can go to Front Office Rocks for any team training. And then Laura Nelson Speaks is my website. So anything about me, my AI interest that I have, speaking opportunities, where I'm going around the country, all of that. So, and Brush Up in AI is a group in Facebook. So I am broaching this conversation of AI in baby steps so that people like you, Meredith, can feel comfortable with it. So find me on Facebook if you're interested in that.
I love it. So Laura has a lot of training on her website on Front Office Rocks for general dentistry. Do not let that sway you. There are so many lessons. I've taken many of them that are absolutely amazing for Inno staff as well. So dig into that. Make sure your staff have access to it. And thank you so much for everyone who has attended. I will be sending out an email shortly with a recording link per usual. And then if you guys have any suggestions for future webinar topics or questions from today, be sure to hit reply on that email so you can connect with our team. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Laura.
everyone. Bye.
See you. Bye.